Imagine Europe without America, without aircraft carriers, without a satellite shield, without military support in the Atlantic. One decision in Washington can leave the old continent exposed. To the east stands Russia, emboldened by its advance in Ukraine. Europe hopes that Article 5 will work even without the United States, but suddenly there is no one left to guarantee it. And now the most important thing, what if the war starts before Europe realizes it's on its own? This isn't science fiction. This is a scenario that could determine what the map of Europe will look like in 10 years. And that's not even the worst part. People in Brussels, Berlin, and Paris fear one question. What if we lose early on? This video isn't a theory, it's a practical experiment. What happens if, in the event of war, Europe stands against Russia alone without American planes, without their logistics, and without the strategic command that has united NATO for the past 80 years? We'll review the early days, initial mistakes, and first breakthroughs at the front, and consider who could lead, who would fall first. And does Europe even have a chance to win a war of attrition if it loses its biggest ally? We'll show you two completely different scenarios. In one, Europe unites and builds an army like it has never had before. In the other, it starts losing before it knows what's coming. Between these worlds, speed, will, and time decide. If you want to know which of these scenarios is closer to reality, stay tuned. Next is the chapter on the war's early days. You're watching Beyond Borders. Let's begin. The first days without the United States of America war never starts where we would expect it. The first shots can be silent. Satellite jamming, cyber attacks, disrupted fiber optic lines that cut off communication between headquarters at night. Without America, Europe loses both an ally and its intelligence. American airborne warning and control system satellites, airborne tankers, key logistics for movement, all of that is gone. NATO is no longer blind, but its vision is limited and its responses are slower. In a conflict with Russia, this slowness can be fatal. The United States of America currently provides most of these capabilities. Approximately 70% of the alliance's refueling aircraft, over 80% of strategic air transport, and the vast majority of satellite reconnaissance that NATO relies on. Without them, Europe could have a front line but lack full radar coverage across the continent. Poland and the Baltic states would quickly report Russian troop movements near their borders and the relocation of tanks and missile systems in Kaliningrad. However, European command centers must decide without assured air superiority. Russia has deployed hundreds of modernized Su-30, Su-35, and MiG-31 aircraft on the Western Front, along with long-range missiles that can threaten NATO aircraft even over Polish territory. In practice, this means that European air forces have to fly farther from the front for shorter periods and more cautiously. The battle plan isn't about a perfect strike, but about what will hold the front for the next 7 days. No one is attacking yet. Everyone is waiting for someone to make the first move. And the wait is long, because Europe isn't used to making decisions without Washington. The most important moment in this chapter is simple. Russia has the advantage in determination. Europe has the advantage in resources. The question is, who will pull the trigger first? Russia is already able to mobilize hundreds of thousands of people a year, and its economy is switched to a semi-war mode. Europe has a larger gross domestic product and industry, but it still operates in peacetime mode, with slow tenders and political debates about every decision. If Moscow strikes with lightning speed, it will try to cut off the Baltics before NATO establishes unified command. However, if Russia hesitates, Europe can use the time to mobilize, switch to wartime mode, and reorganize command under Poland or France. That's the turning point. The first days won't show who's stronger, but who is less afraid to decide. Now comes the chapter that will decide if Europe loses before the fighting begins. Who commands Europe? The biggest problem for Europe without the United States isn't the number of tanks or planes, it's command. The continent has 4 strong players who could take the initiative, but each of them has a different position, different interests, and different limits. On paper, Europe doesn't look weak. Altogether, it has more tanks than the United States, more fighter jets, and more large warships. But those are divided into many types, standards, and national doctrines. What the Americans have unified in a few main platforms, Europe has split among dozens of armies and systems that have a hard time communicating with each other. France is the only nuclear power in the European Union. It has a tradition of strategic autonomy and the ambition to lead, but its political style often comes with words that neighboring countries are reluctant to listen to. Paris wants to decide, but the rest of Europe wants decisions to be made collectively. Germany has the largest economy and enormous industrial potential. But decades of strategic complacency have left Berlin with the resources, but not the reflex. Its army is being rebuilt, and its decision-making is geared more toward peace than conflict. That's why many countries don't see it as a credible leader. Poland is the opposite of Germany. It has the will to fight, a modern army, and a clear frontline mindset. But it's a medium-sized country, and for part of Europe, it's unacceptable for a Polish general to lead the whole group, not because of a lack of ability, but out of fear of the dominance of a regional player who became too strong too quickly. And then there's Britain, standing outside the European Union, but within NATO, still the second most significant European army. London has a fleet, an air force, special forces, and the historical experience of standing on the front line when Europe falls into chaos. But it also has problems: political fluctuations, economic pressures, and the fact that it no longer has a seat at the European Union table. Britain wants to be a co-leader, not a follower. When these four centers of power look at the map, each reads it differently. Poland sees the front, France sees nuclear deterrence, Germany sees industry, and Britain sees maritime routes in the North Atlantic. Aligning these four perspectives into a single war plan is much harder than uniting them in peace declarations. And here arises a key paradox. Europe has four strong players, but none of them is a natural leader of the others. The result is a temporary compromise. A coordinating body is created which works well on paper, but not in battle. Quick decisions become lengthy debates. As Europe waits for someone to act, Russia gains the upper hand. This is the war's most critical point, because whoever will be in command will determine where Europe will try to stop the first Russian strike. That's where we're headed now. The first real front after the Baltic Wars. If Russia can break through, it will be in the Baltics, not because it's weak, but because it's isolated. Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania are three small countries squeezed between Russia, Belarus, and the sea. If a single section, a single road, a single bridge, or a single corridor fails, they are cut off from the rest of Europe. That's exactly Russia's goal with its first moves, the Suwałki corridor. A narrow land strip between Poland and Lithuania, with Kaliningrad on one side and Belarus on the other. If Russia cuts through this corridor, the Baltics become isolated. No reinforcements, no equipment, no supplies, only what they have on site. And that's not all. After being cut off at the Baltics, Europe would have to decide whether to risk a massive counter-operation or whether to let three allied states fall. Military studies have been warning for years that Suwałki is the narrowest and most vulnerable link of the alliance in the east. A strip several dozen kilometers wide that can be cut through under heavy pressure within 2 to 3 days if the other side is slow and indecisive. Russia is aware of the region's weaknesses. It knows where the bridges are, where the logistics centers are, where the ammunition depots are underdimensioned. It knows that in the first days, speed will be decisive, not armored divisions. It also knows Europe will hesitate. That's why the Russian pressure wouldn't look like one big attack, but rather as a series of quick, unpredictable moves. Rocket salvos on command centers, drone attacks on radar stations, infiltrations by sabotage groups near the borders. Kaliningrad is crucial for this scenario. It is the most militarized piece of Russian land in Europe, with such a concentration of missiles, S-400 systems, and coastal batteries, that it can almost create a complete zone umbrella over the entire southern Baltic. That means if Europe wants to rescue the Baltics, it has to enter an area that is under heavy fire from the very first minute. Poland would immediately send troops north. The British, with a rotating contingent in Estonia, would immediately be in combat, while Sweden and Finland would mobilize their air forces. Without the United States, Europe loses air superiority. Russian air defenses would force NATO to stay away from the front, making every flight risky. But the biggest problem will come a few days later. Europe will not be sure whether to hold the Baltics at all costs or to retreat and build a strong line in Poland. Decision-making will become a race against time, and this dilemma will determine which scenario unfolds. If Europe chooses to attack, an opportunity arises. If it hesitates, the Baltics will fall. With that, the war divides into two futures. Next chapter, we'll see which force matters most. Weapons or logistics? Logistics, the true decider of war. On paper, Europe has more tanks, more artillery, and more aircraft than the United States. But that doesn't mean anything yet. In modern warfare, it's not about what you have in storage. It's about what you can refill daily. And here comes the war's harshest fact. Europe has weapons, but it doesn't have the pace. American logistics have been the backbone of NATO for decades. Tankers in the air, huge transport planes, satellite support, docks in the Atlantic. The ability to move brigades thousands of kilometers in days is suddenly vanishing. Europe must decide how much of that it can manage itself. At first, it looks promising. British ports are holding. Polish railways are working. The Nordic countries are sending equipment to the south. But a week later, reality sets in. Ammunition starts to run out. Not tanks, not fighter jets, ammunition. Shells, HIMARS rockets, anti-aircraft missiles, spare parts. Weapons without supplies are just costly decorations. And Russia is counting on exactly this: to wear down Europe faster than it can adapt. The Russians have their arms industry in total war mode. Europe is still in peacetime mode. It's painfully clear just with artillery ammo, European countries were only recently able to produce about 1 million shells per year. Russia can manage 3 to 4 times that amount. The Union is launching new production lines aiming for 2 million units annually. But these capacities are coming late, after years of underinvestment. And that's not all. The war will also expose a problem that has only been quietly discussed for years. Europe doesn't produce enough trucks, chassis, tracks, or rotating parts. Systems fail, engines catch fire, optics need replacing. War isn't what we see in photos. War is maintenance. Russia, on the other hand, already has a functioning system of field repair shops and spare parts, which it has tested in Ukraine. Europe does have top-notch workshops, but they're scattered across the continent and tied to peacetime procurement procedures. Switching to non-stop service on the front line would be a logistical and political shock, and this is where the first breaking points arise. Either Europe will switch to a real wartime mode, speed up production, simplify the rules, combine contracts, or it will fall into a defensive position and start saving. The British aim to strengthen the North Sea, Germans are starting new ammo production, and the French want joint purchases. But so far it's not enough. It's becoming clear which scenario will happen. The one where Europe pulls its head between its shoulders, or the one where it finally understands that time is more important than money. Because now comes the chapter where both futures will finally split apart for good. In the next part, we'll look at the first scenario where Europe pulls together. You can add to that daily. Now comes the war's harshest fact. Europe has weapons, but lacks speed. American logistics have supported NATO for decades. Tankers in the air, huge transport planes, satellite support, docks in the Atlantic, the capacity to move brigades thousands of kilometers in just a few days. All of that is suddenly disappearing. Europe must decide how much of that it can handle alone. At first, it looks promising. The British ports are holding. The Polish railways are working. The Nordic countries, variant A. Europe will unite. This is a version that seems unlikely at first glance. Europe, which has spent years debating every arms purchase, suddenly switches to a mode it hasn't known for generations. War's pressure can accomplish what politics can't in years. And if the Baltics are still holding, if the front is holding, if Poland and Britain are shouting that it's time to act, Europe can break in the right direction. The first step is to command. After weeks of chaos, a joint European operations center will be established. It's not perfect, it's not as fast as the American one, but it finally has the authority to issue orders. France, Germany, Poland, and Britain have an equal say in it. The other states are given clear tasks: who sends brigades, who protects the airspace, who provides logistics. Industry follows. Europe will realize it's no longer about grants, tenders, or political deals. It's about survival. Economists say a war economy is coming. Arms factories are operating 3 shifts. Ammunition is being produced faster than the front can use it. Each country receives a production target, not a recommendation. The French will speed up the production of artillery shells. The Germans will restore capacity for tank parts. Spain will take over drones. Countries closer to the front are repairing equipment. That's not very far from today's reality. Poland has ordered hundreds of K2 tanks, K9 howitzers, hundreds of high-mobility artillery rocket system, and Korean rocket launchers. Germany has a special fund of 100 billion euros ready. France and Italy are launching large air defense and missile technology programs. Czechia and Slovakia are becoming service workshops for equipment from Ukraine and NATO. In a scenario of total crisis, these partial moves could be combined into a much tougher rearmament. And that's not all. The Nordic countries are becoming the backbone against the Russian fleet. The British and Norwegian submarine network is closing off the North Atlantic. The Finns are securing the airspace over the Baltic. Poland has formed the largest land shield in Europe in the past decade. This force will become a unified system that doesn't need Washington's permission. The result? The difference is becoming visible. The front is stabilizing. European air forces are reclaiming airspace, putting pressure on Russia, both at the front and at home, in industry, in politics. Europe is not fighting America's war, it's fighting its own. It will last longer than Russia expected, and with every month it survives without losing significant territory, it plays more and more to its key advantage. Its economy is several times larger than Russia's. Its industry is more technologically advanced and its population is higher. In a long war of attrition, this difference would become more and more apparent, and this is where the turning point comes. If Europe lasts and keeps key territories, its chance of victory rises each month. Not because it has better technology, but because it has more economy, more manpower, more industry. This is Europe that has united. However, in the next chapter, we will see its dark opposite. Variant B, Europe is split. This is the scenario that all generals fear. Not because Europe is weak, but because Europe is politically fragile. In this version, the war isn't lost at the front, but in the minds of leaders unwilling to admit it can't be won without sacrifice. The differences are clear from the start. Northern countries, the Baltics, Poland, and Britain, urge decisive action. They understand the Russian threat and know that every hour without action costs land and hundreds of lives. But Southern Europe is hearing a different tone. For some countries, the war is too distant, costly, and politically unpopular. Old economies are struggling with inflation, new debts, and fears of internal unrest. And that's not all. The division is not only geographical, but also strategic. France won't enter a major war without a clear goal. Germany is hesitant to increase production. Italy and Spain don't want to send ground troops further east. The result is a situation that seems like a godsend for Russia. Europe may claim unity, but its actions remain slow, inconsistent, and divided. The numbers prove it. While Poland, the Baltic states, and Finland are well above the 2% gross domestic product defense mark, many southern and western countries are only now catching up or still falling short. Budgets are growing quickly, but the political will to turn them into real brigades, ammunition, and training is lagging behind. The first big test is coming. The Baltics want reinforcements, but Europe hasn't agreed on who will send them or when. Every day of waiting increases the chance that the front will break. And when it breaks, political division will turn into an existential problem. Some in Europe want to fight, others prefer negotiation. And when these two ideas meet in the middle of a war, the result is always the same. Paralysis. Russian propaganda exploits every crack. It pushes narratives that the Baltics are unsustainable, that Poland is too aggressive, that Southern Europe will become a hostage of someone else's war. And these narratives work, not on everyone, but on enough people to slow down decision-making even more. Logistics are collapsing and warehouse restocking is uneven. Countries fearing escalation are cutting supplies. And while the north of Europe is pushing its limits, the south is reducing theirs. The result is a slow but relentless spiral. Less unity, less momentum, more losses, and therefore even less unity. Where scenario A relies on Europe unlocking its industrial potential, here it voluntarily chokes it off. Not because it can't produce more, but because part of the political spectrum sees continuing the war as a bigger risk than making concessions. In this version of the war, Europe doesn't lose because it has weaker weapons. It loses because everyone acts selfishly. And when collective defense stops working, Russia gets exactly what it wants: time, space, and psychological advantage. That's when the war's harshest truth emerges. Europe may have strength, it may have industry, it may have determined armies. But if everyone pulls in different directions, it can't hold the front politically or militarily. Conclusion: Europe's war against Russia without the United States of America is not a matter of technology. It's not about how many tanks, planes, or rocket launchers there are. It's about speed, courage, and unity. We have seen two futures that could diverge in the very first weeks of the conflict. In the first, Europe unites. It overcomes its restraints, unifies command, and forces industry to operate as it did in the mid-20th century. Britain, Poland, Germany, France, and the Nordic countries will form a force capable of standing up to Russia, and time is the most precious commodity in this war. If Europe can buy it, it can win. In the other case, Europe will be divided, politically, economically, and psychologically. Some will fight, others will hold back, and others will hope that the conflict can be avoided diplomatically. The front will collapse in people's minds, not on the battlefield, and Russia will exploit this, not because it is stronger, but because Europe will stop acting as one whole. And here we get to the real point of the video. Europe already has enough strength for its own defense today. It has industry, it has technology, it has geography that plays into its hands. The only thing it doesn't have is the decision whether it wants to be a continent that relies on America, or a continent that can provide for its own security. If it could quickly unify command, speed up arms production, and spread the costs across the entire Union, its potential would far surpass Russia's capabilities in a long conflict. If it can't do that, it will remain a power giant that's afraid of itself. It's not about whether Europe can win the war. It's about whether it dares to lead. If you want to know how far we are from this scenario in reality today, just look at what Europe is doing now, before it's too late.
If you liked the video, I'd appreciate a like, and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next ones I'm working on. You can support my work with gratitude. To help the video reach more people, click praise. Thank you.